This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Lee. It's Tuesday, December 17th. This is Africa 54. A three-day global summit on tackling the world refugee crisis gets underway in Geneva. We'll talk to the CEO of Birthright Africa, an organization whose goal is to connect people of African descent to Africa. And Ashley Ngwenya, a program officer for SAF-AIDS Zimbabwe, discusses the global gag rule affecting her organization's health services. We'll have those stories in a moment, but first, a three-day summit on tackling the world's refugee crisis got underway Monday in Geneva, Switzerland. Thousands of delegates, including about 100 government leaders, are attending the United Nations Global Refugee Forum. They are discussing how to help the tens of millions of people who have been forced to flee their homes, many through conflict. Henry Ridgewell reports.
Europe's refugee crisis is no longer in the headlines, but thousands of migrants continue to arrive on its shores, seeking a better life. For many, this is the brutal reality. On the edge of the EU, squalid makeshift camps like this one in Bosnia are growing in number. The broken dreams of a new life in the West as Europe strengthens its borders.
All people, not animal. Okay. You see, you world see. All people very cool weather, no sleeping, no food, big problem.
The United Nations estimates that globally 70.8 million people have been forcibly displaced from their homes, an unprecedented number of refugees. The UN says most countries, especially richer nations, are not doing enough to help. The Global Refugee Forum in Geneva is aimed at tackling the disparity.
The central idea is to share the burden and the responsibilities of this vast and unprecedented number of people, this movement of people globally.
There have been similar calls in the past. Tragedies like the drowning of 3-year-old Syrian refugee Alan Kurdi in 2015 have triggered global demands for action with little result. Turkey hosts over 3.5 million refugees, most escaping the war in Syria. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is among the delegates in Geneva. Turkey has repeatedly criticized Europe's migrant policies. Under a 2016 agreement, Ankara began to stop migrants crossing into Greece in return for $6.7 billion in aid. Tens of thousands of migrants remain stuck in camps on the Greek islands. The refugee crisis stretches far beyond Europe. 750,000 Rohingya refugees live in camps in Bangladesh, having escaped a military offensive in Myanmar. Sub-Saharan Africa hosts more than a quarter of the world's refugee population. Conflicts in the Central African Republic, Nigeria, South Sudan, Burundi and Yemen have contributed to the crisis, with 18 million people forced from their homes. And in Venezuela, the political crisis has morphed into a humanitarian catastrophe, with 4 million people fleeing the country. The UNHCR, the United Nations Refugee Agency, says it has a funding shortfall of $3.5 billion, or 43% of its budget. It hopes the Geneva summit will prove a watershed.
We have very optimistic indications at the moment that we'll get significant financial commitments, both by governments and through the banking lending facilities. But we'll also get engagement with civil society and the business community.
That appears optimistic, given the scale of the crisis and the myriad causes that are driving so many people from their homes. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Now, for more on the Refugee Forum, VOA's Lisa Schlein joins us by phone from Geneva, Switzerland. Good afternoon, Lisa.
Hello, Esther. How are you?
I'm good. Now, how significant is this forum in addressing the world refugee crisis?
It's very significant in the fact that some of the most powerful leaders, both government and political leaders and people who are involved in major humanitarian and faith-based and civil organizations are gathered here at one table in order to discuss the refugee crisis, which is huge. There are more than 25 million refugees in the world. Most of them are stuck in areas and countries and refugee camps in poor countries with no prospect of returning home at any time, and they are seeking solutions.
Now, Lisa, we know that refugees have been viewed very negatively, and I'm just wondering what's the impact like when you listen to those speaking today in trying to give refugees human dignity?
It's interesting that you bring up this point because, as you say, attitudes around the world are hardening against refugees. There's a lot of xenophobia, and governments sort of paint refugees as terrorists instead of the fact is that refugees run away from terrorists. They are not terrorists themselves. And so what is happening here is there is a sea change among many of the delegates who are attending here. In particular, a number of CEOs from very major multinational organizations are here who are talking about the positive narrative, as they call it, of the refugees. They are saying that helping the refugees is good for their business, not bad for their business. They are talking about the benefits that refugees who are giving a hand up in society, given work, and allowed to have education and healthcare and so forth, end up being very valuable members of their societies.
Now, Lisa, what has this summit heard from leaders of those countries where some of these refugees come from?
Today, during the high-level segment of the forum, there were interventions or speeches, I should say, by the co-conveners of the forum. This includes Ethiopia, Costa Rica, Pakistan, and Turkey, all nations that are absolutely flooded by refugees. And uniformly, they all spoke about the despair in which the refugees are there, and that they are welcoming and will continue to be welcoming to the refugees. However, that it is very difficult for them to support them because they are by and large poor countries, or at least running out of money. And they're very critical of the wealthier countries who are not pulling their share of the burden, who are refusing to resettle refugees more and more, and are not giving the host communities who need the money the support that they so desperately need.
Lisa, very briefly, what do we expect to hear tomorrow?
I think that there will be a lot of speeches, addresses, and also recommendations by humanitarian organizations, UN aid agencies, but also from civic society, from faith-based groups, and more from the political and government leaders in the world. Many of them, probably most of them, will be pledging that indeed they will take more responsibility in terms of sharing the burden, but and also of pledging more money. Unfortunately, from previous examples, the pledges that are made are very encouraging, but after a while, the meeting is over, and not all of the pledges are met, and this is really very sad.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We'll follow up with you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye. Lisa Schlein, VOA's reporter there in Geneva, Switzerland. Now, in October, Turkish military forces rolled into northern Syria and seized large areas of land occupied by Kurdish peoples. The offensive created 300,000 refugees, many of whom moved towards autonomous Kurdish regions in Iraq. This is the story of one such refugee, 7-year-old Hawas Mesud, and his life in Barda-Rash refugee camp in northern Iraq.
انفجارات دهاتن إيفاري انفجارات دواد تقيا حرد بو إيفار أزرزر شيام قلكي بزور حياتي عم بتشكيل فيدا خوش باب انفجارات فانان إن كان بفيدا وهو أهم شيء خواجب قامش لو خوش ببه ومفقر المال أخوة من فاكون عم قدينة شهر حش مفرابين مطاشتي دخوار عم جتشون مدرسة أخوة ومدهاتن كالكي خو بيركا أخوة جديدن ومهوالي خواجي جديدن ومدهاتن مالي مفرابين دخوار ومنيرو رادزان ومجتشون دبو 10 بابي المطوري هبون مصار صوار دبون هم جشون مالك هالكي خواه جامرونا حنجي كاراوانا جشو وبجميمة وخامني بتوش بيجي قد قود كدر حفظاي ذاتك ودلين بيت شوتو براو بشلوب ومقامش لو قالك ينولوب
حرياك $650 أري قال لك جماعة يعني ما داين كرم فراغي من نهل سوري مكريب وتلفزيون غسالة مقش داني في قيمات يعني وبس حقي كريم شخورطة بخاند وزر كتم
قامش لو وضع جامو بابي مضبوط بو بس أنا الفيدا أنا مضبوطة وبرا قالك مدانم إيه مهرب برا نمان وجامش بابي مرض بهر خواني بين إذا بدهم زاروكا بوي جاقو راضي وبابي مرتنا قالك برا أو نمانه أيابو والله مباشن شو حالتي هي؟ أمباشن خواني بكر وسخور بخورنا ما هي يابو قمنا كم خواني دخون أن أردوغان هنا طيارات أبيشة لا هو نما هي رقيبها ما يا قومي كل زمان عز دقاجم بما مشتاه بزارو كبعين ماشيكي ودانني تو بزمان كيسنا بالكرد المري كرد جين دبي قطان كبين الله كردان.
Well, we're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, we'll have an update on the Ebola situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo. You're watching Africa 54, and we'll be right back. Birthright Africa is an organization whose goal is to connect people of African descent to Africa. The organization's co-founder and CEO, Wala El-Sheikh, joins me live from New York to tell us more. Wala, welcome to Africa 54.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
All right, Wala. Now, very briefly, tell us what inspired you to start this organization.
Sure. Well, I came to America as a young child, going on 11, and for many of us of African descent that grow up here, we tend to lack a sense of who we are because our education system doesn't tell us. Whether we are Black American, Afro-Caribbean, or continental African like myself, I had had some exposure to the continent growing up as a young child, but had had westernized education. So coming here to America, I continue that westernized education, and what we find in the high school level in particular, we just don't really get a sense of that history of who we are. And initially, does it really matter? We don't really know that matters. But as I got older and came of age, I was working in the finance industry and learned about a group called Birthright Israel. And it made me stop in my tracks and say, why isn't this happening for people of African descent to learn about their history and culture? Mm-hmm. And it was a 10-day tip for free. So I said, this is something I need to be a part of. I was starting to feel that desire to connect and really understand myself and who I was within the context of society. And fast forward, here we are about 10 years later since the day I registered the website, and we've had multiple cohorts.
Right, Wala. Now tell us what the impact has been like for those scholars of Birthright Africa once they leave the U.S. and go to Africa.
Sure. So actually, I'll step a little bit back. Our program starts in the U.S. We believe it's important for people of African descent to learn who they are and where they come from, even here, and the contributions that we've made. So we go to the cultural sites, the museums, here, locally, nationally, and meet leaders and entrepreneurs as well to learn that present-day history. It culminates with this amazing, life-changing experience on the continent where you get to see the continuation of understanding the power of our heritage and our culture and where it really came from in our ancestral roots, as well as learning the future of the continent and where business and innovation is going. So it's been really exciting to see both the historical nature and the future of who we are as a people.
So in maybe 30 seconds, tell me about the feedback you're getting from those now who have gone to Africa.
They are just amazed and astounded. They feel a sense of home and connection that is surprising. But then once they talk to the locals and meet some of the people on the journey, they realize, oh, wow, music, culture, food, so similar. This is where we're from.
Culture, food, music. Wala, thank you so much. Wish we had more time. We could talk more, but we got to go. Wala, thank you. Wala El-Sheikh is the co-founder and CEO of Birthright Africa. It's time for our health segment, and joining us now is Africa 54 Health correspondent Lino Mudu with more news on why there are increasing number of Ebola cases in the DRC. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Esther. The Democratic Republic of the Congo has seen an increase in the number of reported cases of the deadly Ebola virus that's linked to ongoing violence by armed groups targeting remote communities, and that's according to the World Health Organization. In its latest Ebola outbreak update, the World Health Organization says 27 new cases were identified in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Thus, 3 times the average number of infections in the past 21 days. Most of the new cases identified in the last week were linked to one individual near Beni town. Dr. Michel Yao is incident manager for WHO's Ebola response in the DRC.
Person passed away is in a place called Aloya. It's close to Beni. but this person unfortunately died.
Despite this latest drawback, Dr. Yao says there is good news.
The last 3 weeks, we were below 10 cases, and this is only in 4 zones. And this is actually where we need to ensure access to finish the job. And unfortunately, it's in this area where we are facing insecurity. This area is a mainly rural area. So the big cities, the outbreak is more or less controlled.
Observers say with up to 100 armed groups believed to operate in the vast forested region of eastern DRC, attacks on Ebola-hit communities have sparked a humanitarian crisis and threatened aid distribution. Since the 2018 outbreak in the DRC, more than 2,200 people have died from the disease. The global gag rule is a U.S. government policy that requires non-governmental organizations to agree as a condition of the receipt of federal funds that they will neither perform nor actively promote abortion as a method of family planning in other nations. Ashley Ngwenya is a program officer for SAF AIDS Zimbabwe, a regional nonprofit focused on HIV and TB prevention, care, and treatment. She discusses the work of her organization in providing health services to the youth and how the global gag rule is affecting some of their services.
It's very important that people, and not just anyone, but the leaders, the policymakers, the people that create the laws that make the enabling environment possible, need to realize that the sexual debut in Zimbabwe has really gone down, and young people are actually engaging in sex at a very tender age, and as such they need to be empowered by comprehensive sexuality education. And when I say comprehensive, I mean the whole package, where you're not just giving them information, but you're also giving them the practicals on how to use the information. For example, how to use a condom. You could tell them about condom use, but not show them how to use a condom, as we are not allowed to make condom demonstrations within schools. So I think as SAF-AIDS, we've tried to really combat that by reaching the in-school youth when they are out of school. We have got programs that we're running in Mashonaland and Central, where we have Rushinga, where we've got our adolescent clinic and youth center. So we try to combat the causes or the main drivers of HIV incidence or HIV transmission, which are mainly poverty, where young people cannot go to school, where young people have got no source of income, and then they are left in vulnerable positions where they end up engaging in sexual transactions that then provide that sustainability that they're looking for.
So more than 30 years after HIV was discovered, you were not even born at that time. How do you assess how far Zimbabwe have come?
I think Zimbabwe had come a long way. We had really progressed until, of course, a lot of the gains have been shattered by the global gag rule. You find that by 2017, a lot of progress has been done in closing the tap. We were very well known. Our minister then of Health, Barda-Rash, was really raving about closing the tap and achieving the 1990s and in reducing the new incidences. And the rollout of PrEP, the rollout of PEP was quite immense. The global gag rule has cut across, be it TB, be it HIV, be it STI transmission. It has just cut across all programming. How? One, you find that many organizations that were implementing HIV prevention services were also giving a complete package that included information on safe abortion and contraception. So by yanking that funding, it means that it's not just the abortion that they will stop, but it's all services that they will stop giving as well. For example, SAF-AIDS had offices in different cities in the country where it was implementing the DREAMS program. And the DREAMS program, we were doing great work with the young people, empowering them, putting them back in school, giving them a skill. But then we did it comprehensively such that they would have a plan A in life, a plan B, a plan C up to Z, where maybe Z would eventually be safe termination of pregnancy for them to continue with their lives. They're not mentally ready, physically ready to be bearing children. So you find that we chose to then not sign the gag rule.
Is it also the case where reality check, governments need to invest more?
Oh, but of course, we have been advocating for domestic funding because it's really a pity site where you find that each time people have sex, they have to say, oh, thank you, USAID, you made condoms available. Thank you, PEPFAR, you made condoms available. It would be, imagine a situation if it was your neighbor giving you that money and every day you have to go and say, oh, yeah, now we want to have sex, may we please have a condom. We have been advocating for domestic funding, but I think with the political climate that we're in, the economic situation that we're in, it is very difficult for a country that is failing to keep its head above water economically to then honor agreements and declarations like Abuja to then finance health for 15%. Right now, 3/4, if not close to all of our health is funded by foreign aid. And so it literally removes the sovereignty in the programming. It removes the targeted programming that is really relevant to what you want, but people are just now following the money.
The global gag rule allows access to abortion only in cases of rape, incest, and when a woman's life is at risk. Former U.S. President Ronald Reagan first enacted the global gag rule, also known as the Mexico City policy, in 1984. Every U.S. president since Reagan has decided whether to enact or revoke the policy. And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Lenore Moudou. Esther?
Being part of Our Voices is about more than just sitting here and talking about women's issues. It's about listening to them
and bringing their opinions to the table and making sure their voices are heard.
Because our lived experiences, our stories, and our voices will help shape the next generation.
All right. Thank you, Lenore, and be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health reports every Tuesday right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night.